My name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, what I'm going to do today is take you back into the 100 Years' War, 31st of July, 1423. Henry V is dead. You imagine you're a young Scottish soldier. You're in the middle of France defending a bridge. Everything hangs on you and your men holding that bridge, but coming towards you is an English army. Can you hold it? This is the Battle of Cravant. But before we get into the actual battle, you've got to understand what's going on in England in July 1423. So don't forget, Henry V, our great king, is dead. The new king, Henry VI, is only 9 months old. He's also supposed to be Henry II of France. Instead of him actually being the king, the country is being ruled by a regent. That's John, Duke of Bedford, a great guy. These, of course, are the old king's brothers. You've got Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester. He is the Lord Protector because the Duke of Bedford is going to be fighting in France. He's in charge of the war there, and the Duke of Gloucester will be keeping the peace in England. On top of that, there is the Treaty of Amiens has been signed, which brings an alliance between England, Burgundy, and Brittany. But while all this is going on, England is on its knees financially. The 100 Years' War achieved one great thing. It almost bankrupted England. And there is a little bit of infighting in England. Something very similar is going on in France. So England has a toddler king, Henry VI. Well, Henry VI was supposed to be the toddler king, Henry II of France. It's so complicated, isn't it? Politics. But this comes from the Treaty of Troyes, signed by Charles VI and Henry V. That's the King of England and then King of France. They're both dead, so the young toddler is supposed to be the king. The problem being is Charles VI had a son, the Dauphin. He was the next in line to the French throne, but he's been pushed to one side, which I think is terrible, but that's my personal historical opinion. Now, the Dauphin is gaining strength and support in other parts of France, especially down in the south of France. But his army, the backbone of the Dauphin's army at this time, is Scottish. So, the Battle of Cravant. As you can see, I've made a model. I've had to condense the battlefield, as you can imagine. For a start off, the River Yonne, which it was fought over, was about 60 yards wide, but very shallow. And there was a narrow bridge going over it. Here you have the town of Cravant. It was garrisoned by Burgundian troops. Laying siege to it was the Franco-Scottish army, numbering around 10,000 men. They were commanded by Sir John Stewart of Darnley, who was the constable of the Scottish army in France, a fierce warrior. They were laying siege to the town when the English Burgundian army, numbering about 4,000 English and about 1,000 of the Burgundian troops, arrived to try and relieve the siege. Let's have a look at what happens. So the Franco-Scottish army fighting for the Dauphin, they're going down into Normandy, Burgundy, into these different places to try and take various castles. And the first one on the list is Cravant. They invest the siege. All is going to go their way. I mean, nearly 10,000 troops. That's quite something. So the garrison doesn't stand a chance, except for this alliance between the English and the Burgundians. The English, they are going to send a relieving army. And now the Earl of Salisbury, he meets his 1,000 Burgundians at Auxerre, a town not far away. His problem is combining his army. He's worried that the Burgundians might run or they might want to fight as a separate entity. But he combines them. He unites them into a cohesive force. As they approach, the Scots, who are the main part of the army in front of Cravant, see the English coming. So they realise that they've got to turn and face the English. Now the Scots have a large number of archers. They got their mantlets up, protecting themselves from the crossbow shots of the enemy. They're still laying siege to Cravant. They can't turn these mantlets around. They are now vulnerable to shot from the English bowmen. So the Scots, they are defending against the castle because on the battlements there are crossbowmen shooting down. And they are now going to be shooting their arrows at the English. But the key to the battle really is the river and the narrow bridge that runs over the River Yonne. As I mentioned, it was around 60 yards wide, this river, but what the Scots hadn't anticipated, it was shallow and it had a shale bottom. But they have a strong Scottish contingent of soldiers holding the bridge. But what happens is quite interesting. I've read several accounts of this, and the one that I go with is there was a standoff. And then the Scottish archers start to pour their arrows into the English. How dare they do such a terrible thing? So the English return shot. But the English are fed up at being shot at by their Scottish cousins, and they soon realise, probing the water, that they can just walk across the river. Can you imagine the Scottish soldiers on the bridge going, "Oh, they're coming across the river," you know? It must have been horrendous. But our men-at-arms now also see that they could ford the river. There is then a push at the bridge. The Scots begin to give ground. When the garrison inside sees this change, they've got their horses. They are mounting up, their foot soldiers. They pour across the drawbridge and smash into the back of the Scottish and the French army. There's only a small part of the French army can actually escape. The rest of it are actually trapped, but they don't surrender. The Scots, God bless them, will not surrender. Now what ensues is an incredibly tough battle of hand-to-hand combat. The noise must have been incredible. Not just the crash of steel, the whooshing of the arrows, the shrieking of men, but also the horses. The sound of the battle here must have been absolutely deafening. Can you imagine the scene? Can you imagine what it must have been like for these Scottish soldiers? Now, 1 minute they're the attackers, they're laying siege, looking forward to capturing the town, a bit of loot and so on and so forth. And then they have not only the English, the hated English, coming across at them, the garrison also attacking them from the other side. There is nowhere to run. It's such a narrow battlefield. Now, there are those who did try to escape. Some of the French allies, the Lombards and the Aragonese, they managed to slip away and they were cut down because in the baggage train the English had horses ready for the pursuit. But the more English that pour over that narrow bridge, the harder it is for those Scottish defenders to hold it, and eventually they are overrun. They don't break and run, those Scottish soldiers. They fight until they are slain. The Scottish losses were anything up to 4,000 dead. The French lost around 1,200. 300 of the French losses were actually noblemen. And Sir John Stuart, he was captured, but he'd been wounded. He lost an eye. And that just goes to show that, these guys didn't run. They stood and fought to pretty much they couldn't fight anymore. It's one of those tragedies, isn't it? Because now the Scottish army in France has basically ceased to exist. They've got to rebuild it. The Dauphin's strength in the south of France is waning, because what's going to happen is the Earl of Salisbury, he's going to regroup and he's going to start to retake towns and castles. So the story, the 100 Years' War, will continue. The problem is, England's sick of it, and that's the truth of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support our channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to give a shout out to some of my Patreon members. I've got it written down here. Lucy and Zane, congratulations on your recent anniversary. I like that. Then we have Gaza and Corinne DeFazio. And a special mention here, I was recently on a cruise on the Celebrity Eclipse ship, and one of the crew members, the first one we met, actually recognised who I was. I was blown away. So a special mention to Robert Wetherington. Hey guys, thanks a million. Bye for now.